All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to.
During break, I'll make them a copy.
Oh, okay, great. We're going to go ahead and start week 8 of Women in the Bible. We've got, Lord willing, 6 ladies to look at tonight. Gonna try to be a little ambitious, but 2 of them are in groups. So Euodias and Syntyche and Rachel and Leah we're going to handle as a single study. So we'll still try to spend the same amount of time on each grouping. But again, I'm amazed at how God has enabled the study to be organized on a similar topic. We're going to try to really do 2 topics today. The first topic is how the enemies can get hold on a ministry and how enemies can ruin a ministry or a family. And so that's what we're going to see tonight. Euodias and Syntyche, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, and Dinah, all these ladies from lesson 8 had trouble waiting on God. They had trouble trusting that God was going to keep his promises. And a lot of times we get nervous, we get anxious, we get fearful, we get confused. There's a lot of reasons why we either don't do what God asks us to do, or we go ahead of God and we meddle. And we do things we don't have the authority to do. And we're going to find that in a lot of these situations, these women were put in tough spots. They were put in situations where they were being treated unrighteously. They were being treated unfairly. Yet they acted in a way to try to fix the problem, which was just as bad. And many times we become the very thing that we detest. We end up being part of the problem instead of part of the solution, when in our mind, all we're doing is self-advocating. And so what we need to do, and we're going to see a good example in our second hour of a lady who allowed God to fight her battles for her. We're going to see a lady who her good works were ill spoken of, but she allowed God to defend her. And she didn't need to. She knew that what she did was right. It was an act between her and God. And she trusted God to take care of her. And so we're going to take a look at, that's going to be our second hour and our second group. That's Mary of Bethany. You're familiar with her. But the ladies in this first section really made some bad choices. So we're going to be able to have a mixed bag with Euodias and Syntyche, because Paul commends them. With Rebecca, she started off great. She was a woman of faith. She comforted her husband. She decided to leave her home. So a lot of good things, but she ended poorly. And it was because of this need sometimes that we have to try to fix things. Try to fix a situation instead of trusting that God will take care of it. A lot of times we can just trust that God is working it out. There's so many things that God is doing that we're not aware of what he's doing. But yet we sometimes go ahead of God and we end up meddling. We end up doing things we don't have the authority to do, and it makes the situation worse. So let's take a look at our introduction here. The believer's spiritual enemies will stop at nothing to use whatever means necessary to cause division in an attempt to cause the work of God to cease. The world system, designed by Satan to distract individuals, causes the believer to lose sight of the desired will of God for their lives. And then, of course, we got that sin nature that's constantly seeking to sabotage every relationship. And the sin nature is pursuing a gratification that is never going to be fully realized. The sin nature is just going to want more, and more. And it's going to burn down anything between it and its goal. And its goal is never attainable. Satan, he's described as the one who will steal, kill, and destroy, right? That's how he was described in the gospel, the thief who will steal, kill, and destroy. These enemies, again, do not have the believer's best interests at heart, and they're going to leave lives in tragedy and in ruin. The ladies that we're going to meet tonight fell victim to these enemies. And again, their motivations are varied. Some of their motivations, we can't fault their motives. They're trying to fix things, but their methods were suspect. And we can learn from their poor choices. So let's take a look at Philippians chapter 4 here. Euodias and Syntyche. These women are mentioned in one verse of Scripture and referred to in another. 2 verses. But the problem is that they were involved as a common issue that pops up in our churches today. Let's read what Paul has to say. Philippians 4:1, we'll read 1 through 3. Therefore, my brethren, dearly beloved and longed for, my joy and crown, so stand fast in the Lord, my dearly beloved. I beseech Euodias and beseech Syntyche, that they be of the same mind in the Lord. And I entreat thee also, I was trying to clean my screen, and I ended up moving to a different chapter. I entreat thee also, true yokefellow, help those women which labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and with other my fellow laborers whose names are in the book of life. So, during my almost 50 years in fundamentalist churches, I started going to one as a 4 or 5 year old, and I've been in a fundamental church my whole life. I've seen far too many clashes among believers that were precipitated by a territorial mindset. Selfish and unwelcoming attitude leads to individual fiefdoms instead of a unity that advances the work of the ministry using the differing gifts that have been given. These different gifts are not a threat to ministry, but they're meant to be used to the ministry's advantage. Let's pop over quickly to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. A lot of times we interact with somebody and their gift is different from ours. So their approach to Christian ministry is different from ours. Again, you got people that like being behind the scenes. You have people that are organizers. You have that exhorter that is not shy, stating the opinion to try to turn people their way. You have the pastor and the teacher that are trying to turn all these incidents into teaching moments, right? Then you have that one with the helps or ministries in the back that are just kind of happy to stay in the background, or like, I'll do this, yeah, I'll do that too, I'll do this, whatever makes things work. But let's take a look and see what we see here in verse 4. There are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. Differences of administrations, same Lord. Diversities of operations, same God which worketh in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. And he talks about one has the word of wisdom, the other one has knowledge. One faith, the other gift of healing. One miracles, the other prophecy. Discerning of spirits, divers kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will. What was the common theme all the way through? What ties all these different people together, different personalities, different gifts, different spheres of influence? Same Spirit, same body. And so what we're going to find is the same answer to both of our sets of problems in the first hour and the second hour is to recognize when we're carnal and to seek to be spiritual. Because the Spirit is going to move us all in the same direction. And so we need to be able to have those characteristics of that spiritual believer. Dennis addressed them last week again in that passage in Philippians, where we should be able to recognize when my sin nature is in control. I should be able to recognize when the Spirit's not doing his job, because I haven't given him, the steering wheel. So the common theme here is the Spirit. So throughout the New Testament, we see other clashes. Peter and Paul, Talked about that last night in church. Paul and Barnabas, these were doctrinal disputes. But what we see here in Philippians is something that seems to be a personality struggle. This seems to be a problem that's not based in doctrine. And something that is significant in verse 2, he begs each one of them individually. He doesn't take a side. He says, Euodias, Syntyche, be of the same mind. He begs each one of them that they be of the same mind in the Lord. And it's also interesting in verse 3. We have a nameless individual. We understand it was probably the bishop of the church. Could have been Timothy, could have been Silas, could have been another elder that we're not. It's the one who received the letter. He says, I entreat you also, true yokefellow, help those women which labored with me in the gospel, with Clement, with my fellow laborers whose names are in the book of life. So there's 3 words in verse 3 that have our soon prefix, our intimate with prefix. We have this idea of help. That's a verb. And the idea there is su lambano. It's to basically try to bring together. To try to bring together is the goal here. And he says, they labored with me in the gospel. Right? Labored with. There's our soon again. Soon athleo. To wrestle together with. This is the idea of a tug of war. Right? Everybody on this side of the rope is pulling the same direction. Okay? Labored with me in the gospel. And then he has a noun, these fellow laborers, right? There's soon ergos, fellow workers. And so this brings to mind the words that Paul used. We studied this group of words in our position, possessions, and privileges study on Wednesday night. The position of the believer, the possessions of the believer, and the privileges of the believer. The possessions of the believer, we looked up 9 words that had this soon prefix. And I listed them for you here. Built together, chosen together, suffering together, slaves together, knit together, blended together, bound together, citizens together, and workers together. These are terms that Paul uses throughout his letters, and they're meant to trigger a mental picture of what happens when I look at you all. When I look at my brothers and sisters in Christ, I'm supposed to see you this way. We're blended together. We are, this was the idea that we looked at in 1 Corinthians 12. Different gifts blended together into one body. All right? Knit together. We are connected by the head, by Christ. We are knit together. He's our commonality. The Spirit knit together the way sinew is connected to bone. The way muscle is connected to ligament. We're knit together. Citizens together. I'm not to consider myself a Floridian or a United States citizen as much as I am to consider myself a citizen with you guys. Our citizenship, our politics are in heaven. Philippians chapter 3. And so we have all these workers together, slaves together, chosen together. These mental approaches that help me direct long-suffering towards believers, kindness towards believers, because we're all in this together. And so Paul, he says to the bishop, let's say he was talking to Timothy, right? Let's say he was talking to the pastor at Philippi. Help these women see that they're a part of something bigger. Help these 2 women see that their division is not going to just hurt them, that it's going to hurt others in the church. And so Paul beseeches these women to be of the same mind. Now, what mind is he telling them to have? Well, let's go back. This is something that Pastor just recently talked about too, Philippians chapter 2. which mindset are we all supposed to have? You hear sometimes when you can be anything you want, be Batman or be kind. You hear those, you see those memes or those videos. When you can choose anything you want, choose kindness, choose this. Well, Paul says when you can have any mindset you want, let's have the mind of Christ. That needs to be our mindset. And so what do we learn here? We learn that the one who had the most to give gave everything and humbled himself so that God could highly exalt him. Jesus did not come to earth with a personal agenda. He laid all of those things aside. If anybody could have had a personal agenda and was worthy of grabbing, it was Christ. But he laid it aside and said, not my will, but the Father's will. And he allowed the Father's will to be done, and he elevated. So I can't make this about me. It's got to be about God's will. It's got to be about what the Father wants. And so I have to lay aside my own desires, my own idiosyncrasies, my own perceptions, and walk by faith at what God calls us to do. And this is what Paul is asking these ladies to do. Let's have Christ's mindset. A mindset that allows God to exalt instead of seeking to advance our own personal desires, our own personal agendas. A mindset that sets aside and sacrifices everything possible in an attempt to see the power of God at work in this world. Let's read what Hendricks has to say here. Paul uses the word for mind that's found in a few other places in the book of Philippians. Philippians 1:27 and 28. Let's go back and take a look at that. It says, only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ, that whether I come and see you or else be absent, I may hear of your affairs, that ye stand fast in one spirit, with one mind. Here's our word here, psuche, striving together for the faith of the gospel, and in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident token of perdition, but to you salvation and of God. Let's let our behavior fall in line with this one spirit, with this one mind. Let's take a look at chapter 2. Fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded. Okay, this is a slightly different word, phroneo, but so he uses the word framing of the mind here. Fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. This is again this is a link of, you see the phro, the frosune there. This is one of those big, lowliness of mind, one of those big Greek words. Let's each esteem other better than themselves. Jumping ahead, verses 14 through 16 of the same chapter. Do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I may not have run in vain, neither labored in vain. I don't see our word. Where's our word there? I don't think that's it. Nope. All right, I may have gotten that reference wrong. Chapter 3, verse 1. Let me see. Here, as so often before, the apostle stresses the idea of militant unity in a world of unbelief and hostility. Well, here I get a quote. I think it's going to work great, and turns out not to be the quote I'm looking for. A common mindset, the mind of Christ, is necessary for the believers in true unity. We started off great with that phroneo. That's that framing of the mind. It's also interesting to note, again, that Paul not only pleads with the women, but to their pastor. Now, something that we should note, we don't want to minimize here. We want to understand the dynamic of the Philippian church. Go back to Acts chapter 16. Who were the first converts of the Philippian church? They were women.
Yep.
They were women, right? This church started with, was it Lydia? We see it in Acts chapter 16.
They were washing clothes or getting water or something.
Yep. They were all going down by the riverside, right? Back up. Here it is. Yep, Lydia, seller of purple. On the Sabbath, we went out on the city by a riverside where prayer was wont to be made. We sat down. We spake unto the women which resorted thither. A certain woman named Lydia, seller of purple, of the city of Thyatira, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended to the things that were spoken of by Paul. She was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house, abide there. And she constrained us. This is the beginnings of the Philippian church. And so this letter is coming to a church that was basically founded with women. So is it any coincidence that this is who Satan's attack is focused on? That this is who the sin nature, these women who were so important, so vital to this church, this is where we're going to attack. This is where the enemy seeks to attack, whether it's sin natures or whether it's Satan. And so that's what's going on here. This is where the enemy will focus and try to get problems there. All right. So that's Euodias and Syntyche. Our answer there is let's try to have the mind of Christ. Let's not make it personal. Let's not make it about us. Let's have the same type of thinking. And when you have two people that are trying to work together, but their goals are different, you got them on opposite sides of the tug of war rope. You have contention. And what we're going to see is that it's very important that why did Paul admonish also the pastor? Because there's a command structure in place. And it's important that if I'm spiritual, I'm not going to have any problem submitting to the authority that God places in my life. I'm not going to have any problem saying, okay, I may not understand, I may disagree, but let's move forward. I'm going to submit to the authority of the pastor. And so this is part of what was going on here. But again, I think Paul's admonition had those three words that use that soon. This unity is something that's important. This coming together is a focus. And I think that was probably the idea of Hendrick's quote there is how unity should be our goal. This coming together should be our goal. All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's go to Genesis chapter 24. We have our second character tonight, or literally our third. And the account of Rebekah is an excellent case study of what happens when personal agendas come into conflict with the plan that God has for our lives. We believe that we know best about how to bring about goals without trusting that God already has a plan, one that I need to learn to submit to through his established chain of command. Rebekah sought to bring about her idea of fair and just through any means necessary, causing years of conflict in her household. Let's look and see how she started off well, though. She, when we first meet her, Abraham is trying to find a wife for Isaac. He sends his servant, and he says, let's go try to meet some family. Let's go try to find somebody who's going to be a good bride for Isaac, for my son. Okay? And he goes to his country in verse 4. And the servant's like, I think this is Eleazar. And he says, what if she don't come with me? If I'll go find her. And I'm like, that's a good one. You know, that's a solid pick right there. But what if she doesn't come with me? And Abraham said, you need to trust that God is going to send his angel before you, and you'll take a wife unto my son from thence. Abraham had faith that this is how God was going to fulfill the promise that he gave him so many years ago, the Abrahamic covenant. And he says, if she decides not to come, then I'll let you off the hook. But I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. But don't let my son leave this land. Don't let him go back to where we were from. And so the servant takes 10 camels. He departs. And he finds a place to water them. And in verse 12, Eleazar begins to pray. And he says, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day. Show kindness unto my master. And he says, point her out to me. Let me know that the one who decides to be a servant is the one that I'm going to find. And verse 15, this is, again, where Abraham's faith was found to be fixed on the right place before he had done speaking. God is answering his prayer before he can get the words all the way out of his mouth. Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher on her shoulder. She's a great candidate, fair to look upon, a virgin. She went down to the well, filled her pitcher, came up. And so not only is she a looker, not only is she a sweet girl, but she's also, she has a servant's heart. She says, drink. And how many camels did he have?
10.
Verse 19, when she had done giving him drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels until they've done drinking. Okay, that's a lot of water down, water up, water down, water up, water down, water up. Camels probably are going to drink more than one, and she did it, let's say 40 or 50 times to try to make sure these camels got everything that they needed to drink. And so she hasted, emptied her pitcher into the trough, ran again, and kept drawing for the camels. And the servant is wondering at her, held his peace, to wit whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. He finds out that, yes, she is the one. He, again, is just trusting that God is going to do what God said he was going to do. Now, when she finally makes a decision later on in the chapter, he goes and he begins to deal with her parent. He tells a story. Before I had done speaking in my heart while I was praying, she made haste. He tells this story again. But now we get to where she's supposed to make a decision. They called Rebekah and said unto her, will thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. So not only is she prepared to the Lord, she's kept herself pure. She has a servant's heart. She's a hard worker. But she also is willing to leave her father's house and go with this stranger that she just met that day to fulfill God's plan for her life. This is a woman of incredible faith. This is an amazing faith that she has. Now, something else that we learn about her, she goes and she marries Isaac. And she becomes a comfort to Isaac because of the passing of Sarah. And so she fulfills her role as the matriarch of the family. But there's one problem. She's not having kids. And she goes for 20 years without having kids. So if you've ever met a couple that is struggling having kids, it's hard. It's hard. Have we done something wrong? God, why are you judging us? We so want a family. We so want kids. And there's a lot riding on this particular pregnancy, right? Isaac didn't have any other wives. This is it. If God's promise to Abraham is going to be fulfilled and we're going to have stars on the sky, sand, on the seashore, we got to have at least one. You can't do it with none. Now, Isaac didn't follow in his dad's footsteps, and we didn't have the Hagar-Ishmael problem, thank the Lord. But we see here something else. We see when there was a problem, what did Rebekah do? Verse 21. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And the children struggled together with her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. So not only did Isaac go directly to the Lord and say, he made the request. We would like a son. God granted that request, but there was a problem. This pregnancy was not an easy pregnancy, but to Rebekah's credit, what did she do when she faced adversity? She went to God. Now this is again, let's just take a look at what we know about her so far. Hardworking, has kept herself pure, showing amazing faith. When she faces adversity, she goes to God and seeks an explanation. If she would have just been consistent with these characteristics on through her life, she would have been fine. But she left these characteristics aside. And she goes from trusting bride to a meddling mother. Because we all know what story's coming next, right? When Rebekah sought answers from God, lived out from faith, she continued on a good path. But as good as Rebekah began, she finished poorly. Each parent here had a favorite. We have these are our twins. This is Esau and Jacob, right? Now, Esau and Jacob are talked about in a lot of other verses in the Bible. Esau is actually, we're told that he's out from the evil one, that he savored the things of the earth. He didn't care about spiritual leadership. He didn't care about the promises that God gave to Abraham. Obviously, Isaac and Rebekah, they were important, and they became important to Jacob. Esau didn't care. In fact, Esau married two women that ended up torturing his parents. The verse that we see about those, they caused a lot of, this is 26, 34, and 35, right? What do we see about those two that he married? Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and Rebekah. Didn't like their daughters-in-law too much. These ladies, again, what did he ask Eleazar to swear? Go back to Laban's house. Go back to my family's house. Bring someone that we're going to be able to get along with. Bring someone who God has set aside for us. Esau didn't care. And so we see a lot about Esau and Jacob. We see in the book of Romans that God had actually promised Rebekah, what's going on in you is to get two nations at war. And the older is going to end up serving the younger. Now this is important because she was promised that by God. But yet when it came time for the blessing to be given, she didn't trust God to live up to what he told her was going to happen. She said, no, I got to get involved in this. I got to make sure. She had a small God mentality. I got to get in and fix this. I got to be the one that makes sure that my favorite, because again, what we say, her motivation was probably, well, God told me that the older was going to serve the younger, and here's Esau getting ready to get the blessing, but I know he's already sold the birthright, so this shouldn't happen. Her motivation was probably, no, I got to help God out. But that's a small God mentality. God is never going to ask you to lie, cheat, and steal to bring about his will. And that's exactly what happened. Again, each parent had a personal favorite. Dad liked the hunter of the field, brought him good venison. Esau, again, didn't care much for what the plan that God had for the chosen seed of Abraham. He sold his birthright for a bowl of pottage. Now, Jacob was a swindler, not much better than Esau, but he was a guy that God could develop. Okay? And Jacob was mom's favorite. Jacob was Rebekah's favorite. As Isaac neared death, the time came for the blessing of the firstborn. Isaac asked for his favorite son to kill the game, prepare his favorite meal. Rebekah, eavesdropping that this is about to happen, took over, led her son to deceive his father, steal the blessing. Here, put these goat skins on your hand. Here, let's take this. Let's cook it up and make it taste like venison. Here, let's do this. Let's do this. And Jacob jumps in with both feet, right? He goes in and says, God favored me and allowed me to kill early. Because Isaac was like, that was quick. And Jacob, again, goes right along with what his mom said. Again, his swindler nature took to it pretty quickly. Rebekah failed to trust God as she had in her youth, and instead took the situation into her own hands. What was the problem here? Well, number one, it's never right to do wrong in order to do right. That's something that we need to remember. It's never right to do wrong in order to do right. The end justifies the means is not something that should ever pass a believer's lips, right? Either it's right to do or it's wrong to do. But what are the consequences of sin? And I think that's what we begin to see at this point. And we're going to see it in the second hour with Rachel and Leah. These ladies, this idea of favoritism. I got my favorite kid. Isaac's favorite was Esau. Rebekah's favorite was Jacob. This jealousy on behalf of the parents leads to jealousy on behalf of the kids. And when Esau found out Jacob had stolen his birthright, what did Esau do? He threatened to kill him. He said, I didn't get the blessing I was supposed to get. You better run. If I see you tomorrow, then you're going to be dead. And so the family is torn apart. Rebekah never sees her favorite son again. He goes away. So her decision to try to act on behalf of God was misled. When she died, her sons were still mortal enemies, and Jacob believed that the next time he saw his brother, Esau was going to kill him. Go all the way ahead to Peniel, and Jacob wrestles that night with the angel of the Lord, second person of the Trinity, and Jacob, remember, he sent all these gifts to Esau. He sent everybody ahead, and he hid behind. God wrestled with him that night, and he's like, that wasn't very wise, and went up front. And we, again, had reconciliation. But he had every reason to believe that he was going to face his adversary when he saw his brother. God had promised that the older would serve the younger, and God did not need Rebekah's help to bring this about. He did not need her to act unrighteously to bring about. He could have accomplished his goal in any number of ways. She did not need to act in an unrighteous way to bring about God's plan. She needed to continue to trust God and work things out to his will and his way. Actually, Rachel and Leah is not the second hour. They're my next group here. Let's keep going. Genesis chapter 29. We know the story here. We don't have to tell the entire story. Jacob, the swindler, goes to Laban and promises 7 years' labor for Rachel. He falls in love with Rachel. We have him going back to... So Rebekah was Laban's sister. So Rebekah, her two nieces here, Laban's daughters, Rachel and Leah, they each were treated in a way that they felt unloved. Leah felt unloved by her husband. Genesis chapter 29 and verse 31. The Lord saw that Leah was hated. Verse 30, he went in also unto Rachel. He loved also Rachel more than Leah and served with him yet 7 other years. So Leah felt that she was not favored by her husband. But what does Rachel think? Verse 1 of chapter 30, when Rachel saw that she was bare Jacob no children, Jacob envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children, lest I die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? So you have two ladies that both feel unloved. and unappreciated. All right? What does this lead to? Well, this leads to an intense competition where we're going to try to win Jacob's favor by having kids. And so we're going to get our handmaids involved, Zilpah and Bilhah, and you start having a flurry of activity, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and then finally Joseph and Benjamin, the two that Rachel has. And Rachel dies in childbirth with Benjamin. And so we have this rivalry. We need to understand that jealousy and envy are emotions that are thieves that are going to steal our contentment, our peace, and our joy. When I see something that somebody else has that I want, if I don't deal with that, if I don't turn that over to God, then that's going to steal my joy. That's going to steal my peace. I'm not going to be able to be happy until I get what it is that I'm looking for. And so this competition, and we see the same cycle that was created by Rebekah and Isaac, now with Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. Everybody's got their favorites, right? What ends up happening to Joseph? His brothers get sick of him and end up trying to kill him. If Reuben doesn't stand up and say, hold on, and hide him and throw him in a pit and sell him to some Ishmaelites, these guys are going to kill him. They're going to kill Joseph. Because Joseph is this little daddy's boy with the coat of many colors who keeps saying we're going to bow to him. This is how families get torn apart. This idea of having a favorite and playing favorites. Which is why I always tell my girls I have a favorite and it changes every day. Keeps them on their best behavior to try to earn my favorite, right? No, you can't have favorites. You're not supposed to do it. Living to try to earn someone's favor is a bad bet. It's a bad deal. I want my kids to try to please the Lord. If my girls are striving to please God, they're not having a problem with me or their mother. They're not going to have a problem with me or their mother. They may not do what we want right when we want, and I'm talking about my adult girls now. It's different. It's different at Dan's age, right? He's got some kids that they better hop to it when mom and dad want them to hop to it, right? You're not letting them, pick and choose the times when they obey mom and dad. But as they get older, you want that teeter-totter to tip a little bit, and you want them to be accountable to God, and you want to see them living by faith and making those kind of decisions. So, but God used these women and their impatient response to jealousy to build the 12 tribes of Israel. But as we're going to see in our final example with Dinah, is it a possibility? So I just gave the 12 sons of Jacob, right? Anybody ever heard of the daughter of Jacob, Dinah? She's got a whole chapter. Genesis chapter 34. It's her own chapter. But you don't usually hear about Dinah, right? You hear the tribe of Reuben. There's no tribe of Dinah. You hear the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Issachar, the tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim, the two sons of Joseph, the double portion that he got, right? You hear about those all the time, but you don't hear about the tribe of Dinah. Is it a possibility that in this flurry of activity and everybody's favorite, that Dinah got away unsupervised? Is it a possibility that Dinah, nobody was watching when it came time? They were so busy trying to earn Jacob's favor that Dinah went out unsupervised. And you got the boys dealing with their conflict with Joseph. Who's looking out for our sister? Who's keeping an eye on our sister? And so now we segue into this. Let's tie a bow on Rachel and Leah. Leah needed to understand that her sufficiency was going to be from God and not her husband. You can't make somebody like you. You can be kind. You can extend them friendship and friendliness. But if you're not somebody's cup of tea, except you're not somebody's cup of tea. Trying to bend over backwards to earn their favor is not going to end well. Leah needed to understand, I'm not going to get my fulfillment from seeking somebody's approval. I'm going to get my approval from God. I'm going to get my approval from God. And Rachel needed to learn that God had not forsaken her. And while he never promised us a pain-free existence, her husband Jacob was not going to be able to solve all of her problems. She went to Jacob and said, give me a child. And Jacob's like, it's not my fault, lady. It's not me. Am I God that's going to open up your womb, make this happen? Trust and patience are the proper responses when things don't work out the way that we expect. Again, God has a plan, and he's going to work out his plan. I don't have to try to micromanage the situation to get it to where I understand it perfectly and it works out exactly the way I wanted it to work out. Sometimes I have to trust that God's going to do it another way. And pain and suffering are usually going to be involved. My mind goes back to our testimonies that we had last night in church. We had Jackie, we had David Coltrane, we had Carrie Bentz. And the theme is that Satan will come to us at our lowest point and offer us a shortcut. But trust and patience and contentment, because God's answer is probably right around the corner. I need to be able to wait. I needed to be able to kind of hang out there. But let's shift gears and take a look at Dinah. When curiosity causes us to act unwisely. Dinah was one of the children of Jacob. She's not listed with the 12 sons. But let's just tell her story here. Her story is another cautionary tale of the sin nature in action. Jacob had just returned from Mesopotamia, settled in Canaan near the town of Shechem. His daughter Dinah goes out to visit the young women of the town. Genesis chapter 34. So I think this is our problem. She went out to see the daughters of the land. It's not that she had a curiosity. That was not her problem, right? It was the manner in which she went and the fact that she wasn't supervised, chaperoned, protected, or allowed to learn about these Canaanites through a filter of God's promises. She just said, no, I'm going to go hang with the ladies. I'm going to go, daughters are going to meet with daughters. Hey, who's your dad? Who are you dating? Who do you get to marry? What goes on around here? What's the problem? Well, Shechem, who's the bigwig, he's the crown prince of the region. The town was named after him. He sees her. And look at the order in which things happen. This is what happens when you're around pagans. This is what happens when you're around ungodly people. They act in an ungodly way. He saw her, he took her, he lay with her, he defiled her, and then his soul clave unto her. He loved her and spake kindly to her. Verse 3 should have been ahead of verse 2. And somewhere in there should have been talking to dad. Jacob probably would have given her to him to wife. When we see what Jacob wanted to do later on and have good relations with the Canaanites, he probably would have been amenable to that. But we see the sin nature that seeks to gratify the flesh first and then ask questions later. And that's what happens. We have fornication here. He sees her. He sexually assaults her. But he's completely infatuated with her and he wants to have her for his wife. He seeks to console her and comfort her. And she chooses to stay with him in the city after the assault. He then sends his father, the king, to Jacob to negotiate for her hand in marriage. Shechem himself pleads with the family, promising to do whatever they want and to pay whatever bride price they demand. Furthermore, Shechem's father offers to let them live in his territory and become a part of his kingdom. Dinah's brothers, now, again, here's the problem. The sons of Jacob were furious. They were grieved. Verse 7, they said, why, this thing ought not to be done. Now, the king Hamor is trying to fix it. But in verse 13, the sons of Jacob began to deal deceitfully. And they said, well, we can't unless all of your males are circumcised. This is the sign that God gave to Abraham, circumcision, and we've all been circumcised. All of your men need to be circumcised. And if you do this, we'll trade daughters. Having no intention of doing that. This was a plan to be able to, the young men deferred not to do the thing, all the house, all the men, we need to be circumcised. Hamor, his son, hearkened. Every male was circumcised. And on the third day, when they were sore, Simeon and Levi grab their swords and go in and kill all the men. They murder all of them. So we want to get them at a physical disadvantage after surgery, and we want to wipe them out. And that was the plan all along. So lying, treating deceitfully with them, and then murder. Revenge. They slew the king, they slew Shechem, his son, and they got their daughter, and they came out. Not only did they do that, they spoiled the city. They took all the wealth, just like raiders would do, just like bandits would do. And so there's no doubt that Shechem and his people were not righteous. But to respond to unrighteous behavior with unrighteous behavior is not the way to go. To respond to rape with lies, murder, and theft is not the way to go. This is the argument behind abortion, except in the cases of rape and incest. Listen to that. Here we have a young lady who's been raped, so unrighteous behavior has been wrought on her, so it's okay to murder. No, it's not. That life is as valuable as someone who was conceived consensually. That life, that extra set of DNA has rights. God is the one who holds the keys to death and to hell. And just because a tragedy happened, you don't put a murder on top of a rape. That's not, and a lot of Christians have a hard time saying that. They have a hard time saying, I could never tell a woman who's been raped she has to have the child. Why not?
No.
Well, why have the rights of that? I'm not happy that you were put in this position, but it doesn't mean that murder is okay. It doesn't mean that murder is okay. Now, something that's interesting, her curiosity, Dinah's curiosity to go around and see the daughters of the land, what did it lead to? Let's read the first two verses of the next chapter. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, be clean and change your garments. They had become idol worshippers, and they had learned to dress the way everybody was dressed there in the land of Canaan. And so this connection right here, back to the first two verses of chapter 34 of Dinah going out to see the daughters of the land, this is the problem with doing that unsupervised, without the filter of these are God's promises. We need to be set apart. We're different. We need to be sanctified. And so this is the idea. We as believers, I'll put a pin in that. Go ahead, your point.
Wouldn't it have been wise, Jacob, to not to be friends with them? Remember, in the beginning, he wants to be friends with them, knowing that they are not godly people, and why make friends with them, knowing this the way they are?
So, the question that Martin asks is, was it not wise for Jacob to be friends with the Canaanites? I'm going to say yes, but God also did not command them not to yet. So, I'm not sure. It wasn't until, again, here's Jacob. We got, 400 years? They're going to go to Egypt, and then God's going to bring them back. And then what does God say at that point? Wipe everybody out, drive everybody out, right? That's when God has given them the command to be pure and to not marry and intermarry after that 400 years. Maybe they could have gone and asked God, inquired of the Lord, and God would have said, hey, keep a healthy distance. I'm sure that would have been wise, because look at what happened.
Exactly. The idol worship. And all
yes,
that. So
yes.
It
And so
was a bad.
I agree. And so I think at the very least, inquire of the Lord what his will is. Mm-hmm. Jacob was going along to get along, and he probably saw an angle. He was the conniver, right? He was the swindler. He probably saw a business deal. Let's be nice to the king. We could probably do some business. But again, God, when we're not satisfied with what God has for us, our tendency is to kind of go out and to go exploring, see what else is out there. and it often has tragic consequences. All right, well, let's land the plane here for our first hour. Each of these women found themselves in situations that were less than ideal, but their lack of faith and reliance on worldly wisdom brought suffering and tragedy. The cycle of jealousy and envy began by the actions of Rebekah and Jacob, continued with Joseph's brethren. The lessons that we can learn from these actions are many. Simple faith in the promises of God, along with submission to the command structure that he's placed us in, will allow God to work in his timing. When we go ahead of God and meddle in things that we're not supposed to, it will have dire consequences for us and our families. Sin will have its rewards. And then to go all the way back to where we started with Euodias and Syntyche, how do we keep these problems that tore apart these families from getting into our church? Paul's solution is to have the same mindset, to have the mind of God. Rebekah was worried that her favorite son was not going to get the birthright, right? Rachel and Leah were worried that their favorites, that they were going to lose favor with Jacob. Euodias and Syntyche were pushing personal agendas, and they needed to have the unity of the church in mind. What's the best thing for God's people? Unity. And we see that all the way through the book. So when we try to take control away from God, those choices are going to have consequences. All right. Any questions on these ladies? All right. Good job. It took us an hour to get through 6. And we're going to trim it down. I have another 6 in the second hour. So not really. All right. Well, let's take a break.